Hello, today I'm going to be talking about a very early prototype of a new device I've been working on for the spinning community, and here it is. So it's certainly not in its final form, but it's a tool to help measure the length of the yarn, and I'm going to get into the details of this in a little bit. But this is sort of the mechanical design I've been working on, and over here is the early prototype of the electronics and screen and sensors that I've been working on. So initially I wasn't even going to work on this device, but then when I looked online and sort of found what the solutions were, and tested a few of them out, I realized there wasn't really a very good solution for this out there right now. So I wanted to see if I could make a better one. And I haven't gotten really far in the prototyping development yet, but I have gotten far enough to be pretty confident that I can do something a lot better than what's out there. So I'm going to talk about existing products and sort of what's different about the one that I would develop. And then hopefully you guys in this spinning community can give me some feedback and tell me whether this is something I should spend some more time on, taking it into prototype and then, final product development. So far, I've been focusing mostly on the mechanical design. I showed you some electronics before, but that's just the first version of it. It's a very crude prototype of electronics. This mechanical portion, I've actually done 4 designs of it so far, and this is my favorite one. So you can see that there's these 2 hooks on each side that the yarn can run through, and you could actually use less of them to increase or decrease the amount of friction depending on how you're using these hooks. But these are all these slotted hooks, so you can kind of just take yarn and roll it through there. You'll also notice that this is some really badly spun yarn, and I'm basically using this because I think if it works with this really bad yarn, spinning regular yarn should be no problem. And it does seem to be working really well with this kind of yarn already. The final version would obviously have much nicer hooks and a very different design. This is just something that I put together very quickly. It'll probably be held together with magnets. In here would be the batteries and some circuits, sensors, a microcontroller, that sort of thing. I think it would last very long on a set of batteries. So that's sort of how the gist of this works. And I think the things that are different and sort of improved in this version are best figured out by looking at an existing solution to this problem. So let's do that. So when I went online and looked for ways to measure the length of yarn, if you wanted a big device, you'd use a Swift and then the number of times around it. But if you're looking for a small device, basically they all look very similar to this. I ended up getting this one. And this one is Berkeley, which I looked up. And that's actually, they make fishing line and a bunch of other sport fishing kind of tools. So this has actually been designed for fishing line. And I was like, well, I wonder how it works. So the way these work is you stick your yarn through this slot and then you turn that lever. And then when you pull it through, already it's sort of, with this pretty nice yarn, it's already not counting very well. And you can get it to work somewhat, but there are a bunch of issues. And I sort of wanted to walk through all of those. So the first one is actually going to be how yarn gets fed through, but to see how that works, I want to actually take it apart. I've already taken out some screws so you can see the insides of this. But the way the system works is you put that yarn through this slot, and then when you flip this over, it kind of holds the yarn into this pulley. And, well, you can see that this pulley is not going to work very well with bulky yarn. Actually, it's not going to work at all with bulky yarn. And even with finer yarn, the way that this is sort of holding things doesn't work very well with the types of string that we're using where it can stretch and it doesn't fit into that groove very well. Works much better with fish line. I mean, this can work. I did use it some, and I could get it into the groove, but it just wasn't ideal. So instead of that, I went with a much more open design where you can sort of see exactly where the yarn's going. It has a really big pulley that works just as well with very thin lace weight yarn. Also, bulky yarn fits in there. I could actually make it bigger if that's something the community thinks I should do, but the way this works, it just sort of has the yarn flowing through there, and you could reconfigure the yarn on these hooks to increase or decrease tension, and I'll talk about that maybe in a different video and after I've optimized the hooks placement some, but right now it's already working pretty well on this horribly spun yarn, so I think that mechanism is much better. Another thing worth pointing out is the way that this spins. It actually turns these dials, and there's a whole bunch, I don't know how it's going to show up on video, but there's a whole bunch of gears that it's turning, and that's increasing tension, which means this whole system is going to have a lot more tension than my system. And I don't really have this portion designed, but the tension of this dial is very light because there's actually no added friction. I'm going to put some magnets in the bottom of that and use a Hall sensor, so there's no friction increase from measuring how often this turns. Basically, as low as friction as I can possibly have by using a metal shaft and bushing is going to be all of the friction of this system, because measuring how often it spins is all done electronically without adding any friction. So the friction on this kind of a device would be much lower as well. This next one actually kind of surprised me, but when I measured yarn, this was constantly off by about 10 to 15% on the length of the yarn, and I guess that's just because they haven't like calibrated it properly, having all of the mechanical portions here agreeing with the size of this pulley here. So I was very surprised by this not actually reporting the right distance. And I don't know if that affects all yarn counters, but I can say with a high degree of confidence that if I were to design one, I would have it calibrated properly to report the correct length of your yarn. Because I'm doing it electronically, I can actually adjust it in software afterwards. And, you know, it just would be something I'd spend a lot of time making sure it reported the actual correct length. Whereas this guy was off by 10%, which I thought was way more than it should be. And the last limitation is this one only reports back the feet. And that's just a limitation of how this mechanical system works. It would make it a much more complicated mechanical system if you wanted to report back other units. But with this, because it's electrical, and I'm going to have a little screen here, it would be trivial to add a little button, and I would certainly do this, that could change between feet and yards and meters. I could even add in inches and centimeters if people wanted those. So you just press a button, pick your favorite kind of units, and go with it. And that would make it, work with people inside and outside the US much better than something that just reports, a US unit. So I do have a few other features that I'm considering adding, but those are kind of extras, and I'm sort of debating before I go into how those would work and spending any time on those, whether this core functionality that I've explained today would work. But at this point, I'd like to hand it off to all of you spinners and give me a little feedback. Do you think that this is something I should pursue? Do you think I should make the next prototype that's actually functional? And if I do, are there any electrical or mechanical systems that you really think I should add or focus on? Those kinds of things will be really helpful for me when designing products. And this is super early. I haven't spent that much time on this yet. So if there isn't much interest, I'll probably just drop it. But if there seems to be a lot of interest, I think this would be a nice product that I could add to my spinning wheels. And because it's so small, it actually fits nice on my store because I can ship it. That was actually a factor in me choosing to do this one next. But I also think that there's, a gap here in the market, and I think I can make, a really affordable solution that's much better than at least the other ones I could find out there. And that's the kind of product that I like to go and make. I don't want to make another product that's exactly like a whole bunch of other ones on the market. I want to create something new like I've done with the electric eel wheel. If you have any feedback or comments or name suggestions, anything you want, just leave me a comment and I'll be reading them all. Thanks for watching.